Hi. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming today. It's we are going to try and continue the conversation that we started a month ago. I hope you either were present. I know Lynn, Catherine, and I can recognize a few of you, or you had the chance to watch the previous recording. But if you didn't, it doesn't really matter. So it was a free flow of interventions, and it just rolled really nicely. And I think we identified a few themes or topics that we could discuss further today, or we can introduce new topics. One thing that I've prepared, because I felt I needed to clarify certain things I said last time, was the difference between the creative experience or the flow state and spiritual or awakening experiences. Because when June spoke, she defined all of these experiences as spiritual experiences. However, there are differences between the creative experience and the spiritual experience, but they do have some qualities that are similar. And there's certainly two very, very positive experiences to be in. So from that perspective, they're extremely positive experiences. So I just want to see if I can share the screen. So I mocked it up just before this meeting, so I apologize if it's not perfect. Let me get rid of some of this stuff. Can you see it? Can everybody see it? So on the left, I put the characteristics of flow state, which is the creative experience. And on the right, I put the qualities of awakening experiences according to Steve Taylor, because obviously different people define spiritual or mystical or awakening experiences in slightly different terms. But for me, what really brings them apart is the quality of attention, whereby in a creative experience or flow state, the attention is focused, which is more left hemispheric. While in the awakening experiences, the quality of attention is a state of open awareness, which is more of a right hemisphere quality. So in the first one, you're concentrated. In the second one, you're relaxed. And I think these are the two major differences, but that there are other aspects that Steve Taylor and Csikszentmihalyi bring out of the two experiences. For example, for Steve Taylor, this state of open awareness brings out an intensified perception. So your senses are particularly alive, and you have a much more vibrant experience of life and the flow of life, whether it's colors or sounds or anything that your senses perceive. You get an altered sense of self. So he talks about a fundamental shift in one sense of self, which sounds a little bit like self-dissolution. So in a mystical experience or in a unitive experience, you have a complete dissolution of the self. And that what brings you to feel at one with either a divine God or the universe or the cosmos. So that would be the most, if you want, extreme kind of mystical experience. But you can have anything in between. So even just forgetting about yourself, that's already partial dissolution. And so he talks about dissolution of boundaries, transcendence of time, emotional transcendence, expanded consciousness, and transformational impact. So that's how Steve Taylor describes awakening experiences. For Csikszentmihalyi, you also get an altered state sense of time and a loss of self-awareness. But the difference is that when you're creating, you also have clear goals, and you need immediate feedback. This is completely different from an awakening experience. And you also get this merging of action and awareness, sense of personal control, diminished awareness of discomfort, intrinsic motivation and enjoyment. So I just wanted to, I'm going to stop sharing. I just wanted to bring out these two experiences, the differences, so that if we agree to call them both spiritual, we are also aware that we're not talking about the same experience. Does anyone?
Yeah, I would like to respond. Do you hear me? Yeah. Do you hear me? Yeah. So I would like to respond. First of all, with regards to flow state during the creative process. So whether it's spiritual or not spiritual is really a question of perspective and the question of what the artist is how the artist is relating to the experience, because some of the artists obviously experience it and they know when they acknowledge the experience as a flow state, but they don't necessarily regard it as spiritual. It's just because not everyone is aware that spirituality is also a secular term. So they're still worried about being classified as religious in terms of their art or in terms of their art process. So it's still there. This particular sort of attitude. The other thing, which I'm very curious about, what other people have to say about it, maybe Degard, I think, is here, and anyone who's an artist who's here, because my experience is very interesting in terms of flow state, because I found myself when I'm really sort of involved and into a very creative type of state of mind, I found that at a certain point, I am sort of dissolving. My consciousness is just nowhere. I just feel that I'm entirely lost in a way in the experience. So it's not exactly what you've been just describing about at that moment. I actually don't pay attention to details. I just find that I disappear. But then I become very perceptive. I suddenly hear certain sounds that I don't usually hear, etc. So there is this boundary, I feel, between these two types of flow states, which the flow state is okay, it's creative, but then at a certain point it can lead to a dissolvement of the ego and the self, and consciousness is sort of everywhere and nowhere. And I was wondering if other people have this experience when they create.
Can I say something? So there's two things, talking from a perspective of Zen brushwork, which I do. So the Zen kind of art and my own art. So when I was looking at that list, Annalise, it was, it's very interesting. And the right hand side seemed to correlate very closely to what in Zen would be called absolute samadhi. Samadhi meaning that focused concentration. And then the other side correlates very closely to positive samadhi, where there's the same kind of focus, but it's action in the world. And ideally, you know, through practice, you would, I mean, where any activity where we're kind of really engrossed with it could be called a samadhi. But with practice and kind of cultivation, it's possible to bring more of that kind of absolute samadhi into the positive daily, you know, into the flow. And so with Zen brushwork, there is preparation, there is meditation, there's exercises, energy raising exercises, kind of body work to kind of let go. So first of all, there'd be a period of meditation, say, and then body work, coming back into the world, but cultivating an energy that was there in the meditation. And then doing the brushwork or the calligraphy. And that is very focused. People, when they do it, say, wow, I don't even remember doing that. But it kind of, you know, it just, it's like, yeah, if it comes from a clear, deepened state of mind, it's just like a bolt, you know, bolt of energy. I'd like to say I achieved that in my own artwork, but that's not, that would be once in a, you know, blue moon. But there's something similar. It's not so direct. I don't kind of go through that whole process in the studio. I don't, but it is part of my life. I would have meditated at another point during the day. So there's something about the flow state kind of occurring naturally because you've prepared yourself for it, and it's, you know, you have undergone a certain training or years of practice, and it comes through. And there's something that happens in the studio more often than not, is you feel absolutely not like doing art, and it feels much more forced, and it's sometimes through pushing through that dross, something happens, and you are in the flow, and then you look at it and think, and then it speaks back to you. The work can speak back to you when I'm lucky, and it will shine something which feels as if it's an energy that I didn't feel I had at the time, you know, before doing it, and it shines back, and it's a blessing.
Degard, do you want to speak?
Yeah, great, thank you. Firstly, everything that Lila says, I would back up 100%. But what I wanted to contribute is the only difference that I have thought about it, as we all have, between material states of being, in all respects, normal painting, hoovering, driving, having medical experiences with drugs, experiences that the medical community call extraordinary, like synesthesia, because I also have synesthesia. I've also had epileptic auras, everything. The huge difference is that in an extraordinary experience, it is just completely unpredictable. It's just totally, what? And you know that it's true when somebody is telling you of their extraordinary experience, because you can feel the vibration, and it's always just literally extraordinary. And so if I told you some of my extraordinary experiences, you would know they were true, because I couldn't have made them up. They're just so bizarre. And this isn't something that you can say, oh, it's this and it's that and it's this. It's just bang. And, you know, maybe through meditation, through a process, you can arrive there, but the imaginal isn't the extraordinary. I do believe, which is probably quite controversial, that many of the biblical stories were extraordinary experiences, and there's an attempted explanation of those, and they're put into a divine context. So that's my piece on it. So I don't know. Also, if we could just acknowledge that the left and the right brain is something that Ian McGilchrist goes on and on about, but it has been fully acknowledged in neuroscience that there is no left and right. So obviously there are differences, and we can feel those differences in our brain, but there's no actual left and right. If we could acknowledge that in this group, Yoram did say that last week. So thank you.
Catherine, do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you. I don't feel I'm really qualified as an artist, although I do participate in art, but I'm a speech and language therapist, and I'm interested in everybody's capacity to be creative. And I think that's an interesting question in itself. What makes us creative, particularly after a neurological event that alters the brain wiring? And I would agree that the right-left dichotomy is perhaps not going to give us all the answers. That there is some specialization in the brain. We know that from cognitive neuropsychology and other fields. But to try and place our other models onto that is perhaps restricting rather than giving us the freedom to define this really difficult subject area. So I think it's a helpful question to ask, well, what is it that makes creation? Is it the perception of the person who's involved in the activity, or is it the sense of the wider community and environment that something new has come into being? And that does it need to have value? So in my own work, I take things back to just a sense of spirituality being a sense of meaning and purpose, and just to keep it very simple. And I'm involved with some other speech and language therapists at the moment, trying to work through a process of defining spirituality in our context. So obviously it is primarily regarded as a health context, but I don't want it to be as narrow as just health. I would love it to be more inclusive and to embrace the arts in the widest sense. And of course, we have poetry, which can be such a difficult journey for some of these folk who have communication issues, or an enriching journey, because the language changes in themselves can introduce some sort of spontaneity that is surprising perhaps to the participants. So that I've probably opened up a few more cans of worms than I meant to there, but hopefully that will resonate with some people's questioning and experiences.
Matilde, I'm glad you came. You're next.
Yeah, is it me? Okay, thank you. And thank you for having me. So I can only give you my experience. So I draw. I don't draw anything representative, nor I'm not interested in the artifact or anything. So I'm interested in the act of drawing. And my research now is on encountering the divine in the act of drawing. So I can only say what my experience has is given me, and what somehow what the literature that I found would say between the difference between being in the zone or in the flow and sort of like a spiritual encounter. So I found that there are three different states. One is the simple one, like I'm drawing and that's it, but in the awareness of where I am as me doing an activity. The second stage is what they would call like being in the moment or being in the zone, in a kind of very intense meditative state. As in drawing research, they call it moment of catharsis, where actually there is the losing of the self, the losing of the boundaries, and they are very akin to sort of like a meditative state or mindfulness state. And then for me, there is the third level, which is on top of that, there is a very clear awareness of a spiritual and divine encounter. I use the word divine in a sense of not dogmatic way, but whether it is sense of which is something that is otherworldly, and that I always say it takes the horizontality of the drawing into sort of like a vertical transcendence. And then I realized that there is something else. That to me is the losing of the self, knowing that there is a divine and extra otherworldly interconnectedness. That's the only thing that I would say. That's my piece. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Alice?
Myself. I think it all goes back to how we define spirituality. And I think Lila touched on that, because people tend to sort of see a level of spirituality against religion. And they're not saying they're spiritual because they are associating it with religion. Whereas I suppose my own definition of spirituality encompasses everything there in terms of creativity, because I see spirituality basically as how we live and breathe and work. It's the very air that we breathe in, and it's the way in which our own values and beliefs become apparent in our words and in our actions. And that includes all the creative dimensions that there are to us. So I think if we hold a definition of spirituality that is bigger than that sort of religious dimension, I think we begin to see that it's not an either or, it becomes a both and it's if you like, in some ways it's nearly just a sort of from 0 to 10 type of thing, and where we are on it, you know, whether we're sort of plus 10 or minus 10 and somewhere in the middle is the 0. You know, that going from that, the flow state that you were talking about to the awakening state. But if you take it that spirituality itself is everything that we do and the very air that we breathe, then it encompasses all of it. I think that's what I would be saying.
Angelo, I feel like I need to call you. Because you sent a paper about the definition of spirituality some months ago for the Scholar Network. And we can't hear you.
Perhaps now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I had that meeting, and I enjoyed the appreciation of my research on the definition of spirituality. And actually, I was feeling like my definition in what I can't pronounce her name, Eibhlis, that is, I think if we consider spirituality just paying attention only to unusual experiences or special states of mind, I think even if we do not exclude intentionally other moments, at least we are ignoring a lot of our moments of life. And I think this involves also not only spirituality, but also a definition of art. What is art? Is art only when somebody intentionally wants to create a work of art? Or can also art exist even when people unintentionally just do express themselves? For example, I think that children, in a lot of things that they do, they are extremely artistic. And I think that it was Picasso who said that he studied for an entire life to learn to draw like a child. But this obviously would make everything much more complex, because, as was already said, this makes the field infinitely wide. So we might get lost, because this way we are considering everything spirituality, everything art. So what are we talking about? We are talking about everything. But I think in order to avoid, to get lost in this so wide field, I think we could narrow the perspective and consider a bit of intentionality when it's on. So let's consider art and spirituality when there is some intention of following what I'm doing inside me, what is happening, and what I'm producing in my life. This is my idea. So without excluding that extremely widening, at least to avoid to be lost, to consider intention as something that could help to narrow the field.
Actually, I think that's a really important thing that you've brought up, the intention. I think that's very important, and we did not discuss it. Does anybody want to talk to it, speak to
me?
Judith.
Intentionality, where does that leave creativity? Because what I'm thinking about, I'd like to fish out sacred art, and I'd like to put sacred art on a little pedestal, please, and say that that's different from spirituality in art. And I'm thinking about the way that it's produced and its intentionality, actually.
Oh, did you ask it to me?
Well, yeah, I think you're the expert on this. I've voted you the expert at the moment, Angelo.
No, please don't consider me an expert.
Oh, yeah. Hard luck.
I personally, I would think.
Angelo, we've lost.
We've lost you. We can't hear you.
On and off. So now it should be again on. So I was saying that I think that intentionality and the creativity do not necessarily coincide, because it's easy if we just think about children. I think in my perception, they unintentionally, sometimes they create amazing things, and I'm continually surprised by how creative they are. But in those moments, I don't think that they thought, oh, now I want to create something special. They are just being themselves. So a lot of creativity can happen without an intention and without any awareness, I think. This does not exclude that intentionality can add a lot in creativity, in research.
Well, thank you ever so much, but I don't know whether I got to what I wanted to think about, but thank you anyway, Angelo.
Yeah, perhaps I missed your point. I don't know.
No, I'm not sure I didn't miss my point, so that's fine. Thank you.
Judith,
Can I just say something very quickly? I'm wondering if in my perception, the moment that we intend to create something that it becomes like a very specific artifact, it is different from when I say I intend to stand up and show up in front of the paper every day, and then allowing to become what I call the vessel for something else in order that the creation happens. And then whether that is an artwork or just an art piece or an artwork or just a piece, then it depends probably from whatever sort of like Western contemporary or not Western contemporary definition of art that we have. But I think that sometimes the intentionality of getting there and creating something specific doesn't then match the output, isn't it? So if we are thinking of sort of like in the flow, in the zoneness, I think in that moment there is maybe less intentionality in the final piece, in the creation of the final piece, but just in the showing up and just being present every day.
Yeah, but in the showing up and doing it, you're actually creating something new because you're letting it flow through you, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, but I think that in that moment there is a part of me, the sort of like Matilde, earthly Matilde, that disappears. I'm not anymore consciously holding the pencil and sending it where I want it to be, but I allowing the pencil to go where the pencil wants to go. If I decided to go out and create something, I'm a horrendous drawer. I can't draw for the love of God. So what I do is very much like a side Twombly circles and marks like this. I can notice the differences of the marks if it is me wanting to go there or if it is me allowing the pencil to go there. And this is the whole point of my research now, because I think that there is a moment in which me, the pencil and the paper become one, and that is what I'm investigating.
Have you come across a bloke called Frederick Frank?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So what he's talking about is this first nen, isn't it? So it goes from here to, it goes from one to the other without an intermediary. And I wondered if Alison had any comments on that, because she's the one that's most versed in Zen art.
Right, thank you. Well, yeah, just thinking about the nens, 3 nens. First one is that kind of prior to thought, when something, like you hear a sound or something, it's prior to cognition. It just is received in the consciousness. Second one is the cognition. That's a bird song or something. Very simple cognition or recognition. And the third one is reflecting upon, I know that's a blackbird because I heard it, I've heard a blackbird X number of times and I know all about blackbirds. So yeah, how does that relate? I'm sure it does. Anyway, that's what I can say about
presumably as he was drawing, he was going into that third nen every now and again. In other words, to try and there was something there, just trying to control it and make the drawing, if he was doing the blackbird, that it finished up vaguely looking like a blackbird, because otherwise you can get what I suppose you might call essence of blackbird, but nobody would ever necessarily identify it as such, although you could get away with a perfectly aesthetically pleasing as artwork as essence of blackbird.
So I actually have a question for Matilde, because you're a psychotherapist, is that correct?
Yes, I am. I'm an existential psychotherapy, yes. Okay, so this feeling that you have of something else flowing out of you, which is not you, it's something, well, how is that different from the unconscious or from Degard's
previous comments about automatic drawing or going into a trance and creating from a trance state, as Hilma Af-Klint. And so I'm not sure whether it's just a semantic difference in terms of terminology.
Part of me thinks that there could be something like a semantic difference, but actually we are talking about exactly the same thing. But at the same time, I think that spiritual experiences, or these experiences, are very subjective, and we are trying to render them objective by using sort of languages that allegedly everybody could understand, but that is very difficult, because I think that the moment that I'm trying to create a material version and create and render them sort of have somewhat tangible by putting words and names and definitions and descriptions, I can only get so close to, but never to define exactly what happens. Whether I'm tapping into the collective unconscious, or the collective unconscious shakes me and comes through me, or whether there is divine God in a kind of like Abrahamic way, or my body nature is I don't know, is talking through, or in a very you know, I'm a sucker for New Age and James Redfield, so which is this kind of like energetic and flow things of me disappearing and melting into nothingness and everythingness. I don't know what it is. I know that I can't control it. The only thing that I know is that I trust the process, but I've got to show up. You know, Polyhymnia as the muse of drawing, writing, and everything. I think that she's the kind of, she allows me to become a vessel or a vehicle for something else, but I've got to do the first step. And that first step is sort of like the most difficult thing. That's the cardinal embodying whatever it is that actually goes and says, well, I'm trusting and I'm open to whatever happens. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes I just get into this very beautiful moment in which I lose myself in everything. And some other times instead, there is this very intense, beautiful encounter, which is very difficult to pinpoint, but that's the whole point of research.
Okay, but are you using an artistic methodology to achieve an altered state of consciousness, or it's the other way around? You're in the moment, in the zone, and then because you want to do something that is artistic?
I had intense spiritual experiences for most of my life. I don't know how much people know about the land where I come from, which is Friuli. 1976, the earthquake. Then actually when everything started happening to me. I had these experiences without actually a sense of awareness, without calling them, without looking for them, and they just happen. They seem to happen more regularly when I engage with some kind of materials, i.e. paper and graphite. If I'm doing paper and paint, it doesn't happen. If I do paper and graphite, it happens. This is why part of my research and the findings are from an alchemical perspective. I think that the sort of like the materiality of graphite and cellulose and everything adds a flair to whatever is happening to me. But I just find it uncanny, and again, I find it very difficult to explain to put into words the experience in itself, and because, as I said, it's very, very subjective in nature, and very difficult to explain. You know, even the differences between being spiritual, being in the zone, or being or religions and everything. That's very, very difficult. Also, because then we can start asking. Hilma Af-Klint, she had these experiences very well, you know, very well described in everything. But if we don't believe in the same faith or practice that she believed, can we take them as true and valuable, or shall we just take do you get what I mean? The layers then of understanding and defining and somehow boxing the moment that we're describing them, it becomes very complicated, I think.
Could I contribute something?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Peter, yes. This in my experience, speaks to the idea that intention is movable, and to be passive in the local mind is to allow intention to manifest from the higher mind. There's multiple layers in that, and it might be, if anyone were interested, I've got quite a lot of material on the website, and it shows up some novel models. I've not seen anything like it, but it brings a bit of clarity to the distinctions, the functional distinctions between the higher mind and the lower mind, and to be passive in the local mind, to show up, to be ready, to willing to accept the input from a higher self level or beyond that, just seems to work quite well, unless there's nothing coming and one has desire for it, but there's no connection. So building the capacity for the connection seems to be the prime requirement. I don't know whether that helps.
Can you share your website, please? Because you just said that you have quite a lot of material there.
I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry. I could tell you.
In the chat, you just have to put your website address.
Oh, I can tell you. It's wisdomschool.nz.
Wisdom?
School.
Wisdom School. Yeah.
.nz.
Okay.
Annalisa, while we have a lull, can I have a go about eidetic imagery?
Sure.
If anybody has got any input on that, I think there's a different kind of imagery, which is the sort of image that we have in dreams and in active imagination, what you might call visionary states. Oh gosh, I've got a list somewhere. Hang on. Tibetan dream yoga, yoga nidra, Ignatian spiritual exercises. It's going down to a different level, and Jungian active imagination. It's using a different part of, I don't know how it works neurologically, but the difference is you get a completely different quality of image. It's as if that image is another level of reality. And that is the kind of image that appears in a tanka or in an icon, a Christian icon, or I think too, actually, in Zen art. It's going to a different level of experience. So that if you meditate on a tanka, you can actually become one with that experience, and hence one with the image, and then hence one with the experience.
Yeah, I would like to respond, Judith, about the icon painters. It's a bit similar to, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, said in the beginning about the spiritual being everything. Because for the icon painters, the act of painting was a totality. This is what they lived for. that was everything. This is why they didn't sign their names, like the Russian icon paintings. They never signed their names because it was not important. I mean, it was beyond the person who painted it.
Mhm.
So it was it's a total devotion to this act of painting, which is coming from a strong religious, but it's encompassed everything. It's like it's the entire life. It's so I think this is very even it's a stage. I don't want to say higher. It's just different from just an intention, because it's the intention is there all the time. I mean, it's not even an intention. It's beyond intention. It's just it's a consciousness that only see the essence of what is being painted. And this is also very interesting, because if you look at the Russian Orthodox sort of icons, very abstract. There's not a lot of details in them, really. Because they are almost like everything is condensed into essences of color.
Mm. Can I come in there too, just to pick
Yes.
up what Judith, what you were saying there about you linked it in with Ignatian spiritual exercises. Some of the, and it links in with what Angelo was saying earlier about children, because Ignatius has got the name of imaginative prayer and imaginative contemplation. But I know of a 5-year-old who in school at the time was coming home every day with stories. And eventually the mother went down to the school to find out what they were doing. When this child came in and wanted to know, could they go up the mountain to be transfigured with Jesus? And the teacher said to the mother at the time, all we do is the curriculum. Now you're looking at infants. The curriculum was to read 2 Bible stories. And that's all she did. And she said for most of the class, it was going over their head, but she was drinking in every word.
Did they not send her up Crow Patrick?
But like that, but so I think there's a sense that goes back to that spontaneity that goes with childhood. And I think maybe, is that something coming back to even, unless you become like little children, that's there as well. So, there's a spontaneity that is necessary alongside the intentionality. And I think if we get too intentional, we lose the spontaneity and we lose the childlike way of doing things. And I think that's what's important when it comes to trying to sort of bridge that gap that we're creating between sort of art and spirituality.
That just goes in very well with playfulness, which I would love to talk about a bit more, how that figures in all of this. There's
1 letter difference between play and pray. Yeah. If you can't play, you can't.
Yeah. What I would say about spontaneity is that I think you're absolutely right, but I don't think the spontaneity is from the self. The spontaneity is from the divine, if you like, or spirit coming to us. I had my first whatever you want to call it, I call it visionary experience when I was 2, and I had experience with the Virgin Mary, and I was in a Catholic school with Franciscan nuns who wore habits. This is in England. And I didn't know what was happening. I had a really fantastic time. I had a really amazing experience, and it was such a sort of extraordinary event that I remembered it. And then when I was 5, my parents told me that I was Jewish. I was quite surprised about that, because, you know, I'd already got an education in a different religion, but it didn't specifically make any difference. The spontaneity was from the divine to me. Mm-hmm. and then there's art, and that's how I then translate that into the art. And I feel that art can hold the vibration of those experiences of us as well. That's my personal view, as trace. And vibration and presence and vitality. And I think that's what a lot of artists of the 20th century were attempting to give, was a conceptual idea of spirit and the energetic presence of it through art. And like Lila said right at the beginning, a lot of artists are still very reluctant to acknowledge that, which is why hopefully these kinds of conversations start to actually open out, you know, that conversation. I think that's spontaneity, but I don't think it's of children. I think it's because it comes from it's surprising. I don't think we can make it. I don't know. Maybe you can make it happen. Like one of the other speakers was saying, when she's drawing with graphite, something happens that's different, yeah, than with paint. Why? I don't know. Does it matter?
I'm wondering if that is connected very much with that sense of innocence that children have, when there is sort of, we are still somehow connected to spirits in a level. Before we grow up, we got all the external conditioning from the rest of society, and then we are blocked off. And I think that art is one of the most beautiful ways by which we break these boundaries of conditioning. Of, you know, we learn to draw, and then I remember teaching drawing to children, and one of the most difficult things that I had was actually keeping parents separate from the children, because the parents are saying, oh, your elephant can't be pink, it has to be gray. And I'm thinking, just let him be whatever he wants to be, instead of actually having to conform and condition. And I think that the younger they are, we are still in that state of innocence and openness, and still sort of connected with divinity. You know, I personally come from spiritually, I think that I'm more towards the Advaita Vedanta kind of way, in which I am always a soul. I just embody, and my soul was never born and never die. So, you know, the moment probably that I draw, that allows me to be so free that I reconnect to the kind of innocence, and that allows me to then connect to that kind of otherworldly divine. And I find it fascinating how, when you actually allow for a child to be, he really is in that kind of, let the kids come to me, isn't it? Unless we are turning into children, we will never encounter the divine again.
Yes, I mean, I just want to talk about about the children. Well, it's what Angelo Degard said. At the beginning of the last century, artists were sort of looking for that particular kind of direct energy, and they called it primal vision. They were seeking for the primal vision, which it's a state of seeing the world as if you see it for the first time, very fresh, very vital. And so they were thinking about the way children see the world, or the way various tribes, people from different tribes, see the world, in a way which is not contaminated by our sort of intellectual sort of way of analyzing and criticizing and everything. So children still have this particular innocence that allows them to participate in life, and And again, creativity is just the way they are. They are creative.
Judith, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it was just the eidetic imagery. If you look it up on Wiki, which is as far as I get with most of my research, it says that it's something that is normally only found in childhood. So my guess is, and my assumption is, that you're waking up an older part of the brain that has been, for whatever reasons, kind of ignored, and that you're using that facility. And I think that probably plays a very, very strong part in imagination, which I think is the spark, is the root of creativity. It's the imagination, the imaging part. So, I'm going to make myself cry. Matilde, I think you're doing that imaging. The only other thing, because I can see Lynn waiting, and I have said a lot, is that I came across somebody talking about Beuys, Joseph Beuys, and that I didn't really get it until he was talking about it, but that he brings in that materiality and a lot of different ideas about images. So at that point, I will give the floor to whoever you say, Annalise. I suspect it's Lynn.
Lynn is next, and then Paula.
I was looking up that, Judith, earlier on. There is a saying by Michael Dell: you don't have to be a genius or a visionary or even a college graduate to be successful. You just need a framework and a dream. And I think that's a very good way of explaining that we've all got a choice. So I'm just relating to when I haven't painted for a while, but when I did a lot of painting, it's almost like I stepped out of this existence, this external existence, into my inner being and connected with the divine and let go of everything else outside. Because when you paint, an hour can be 5 minutes, you just get lost in it. So you're not actually here, you're in that space that is, to me, very sacred. If you allow that to happen, I think that's when your creativity really takes off. And I know, before I paint, I sort of often used to use, if people sent me a lovely card, I used to paint my own version of it and find I'd painted a completely different flower from what was in the picture, and it was only afterwards when I realised, I thought, well, that wasn't in there, but it was just what came through me while I was painting.
Paula, would you like to go next?
Hi everyone, very interesting discussion, but it's been mostly focused on visual fine arts. So I know Lila Moore is a professional ballet dancer and choreographer, and I'm a belly dancer, and I've always been interested in the way spirituality is expressed through different religious lenses. So despite being brought up a Catholic, and I still love Catholic art a lot, and I've been to a lot of Catholic religious places, including Lourdes and Rome, places like that, because I really enjoy it. The Icon Museum in Varna, I was reminded of that when Lila mentioned about the icons. But I've decided to be a pagan because as a dancer and as kind of an environmentalist, it kind of fits in with that. And I feel like a lot of Calvin Methodist ideas filter into what is spiritual. And it seems like you have to be kind of like a goody two shoes. And as we know, those of us who are into Jung, often there's a really like dark unconscious in people who do that a lot, as we can see from child sex abuse cases with religious people and other sexual abuse that goes on a lot. So yeah, paganism is something that kind of, you don't have to do that. You really have to do anything. But talking about flow as well, I'm wondering, is that a spiritual experience? I experience flow a lot in my work and my practices, and it's a very enjoyable feeling. But is it spiritual? I don't really know. But I know belly dance is extremely profane and extremely looked down upon in the dance world. But on the other hand, it is also revered as a very deep and spiritual way of moving. And through belly dancing, I've been extremely profane experiences dancing in restaurants and things like that. On the other hand, I've had extremely powerful, anomalous experiences, which I won't go into because it would take too long, through dancing, very surprising things. But yeah, so I suppose my point is that creativity is not always spiritual. Sometimes it is. I do believe that creativity in the beginning, in the Neolithic and Paleolithic times, was completely about that. Although some male archaeologists say that some of the erotic images found were like a form of pornography, which I completely do not agree with. I think that the way of revering women and the physical body, dance is an extremely nebulous and fragile art form. The minute you've done it, it's gone. And even when it's videoed, it's not a 3D version. Hasn't got the atmosphere of when you actually did it. So it's a very strange way. And in that way, there's not much ego investment because there really isn't anything to show for it. Even if it is videoed and photographed, there's still this nebulous quality. And I actually think all dance can be extremely spiritual, being really embodied in yourself and then rooted to the earth is a real way to feel, you know, transcendence, but sometimes it's not. Anyway, that's just what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing dance, but I was waiting for it. Actually, I didn't want to ask you to do it, but you know, it's very strange because at the background, this photo at the background of me, it's actually was, you can't see it, but it's a photo of Isadora Duncan standing, you know, against these big pillars. So this is what I have at my background. And well, this is a different story, you know, we can spend an entire session just talking about hair, for example. But yeah, I mean,
Paula, I would like you to pin that for a moment because there is actually a lot to talk about that. And you're right, there's a majority of visual artists today. It's a shame that June isn't here to represent the music. We would love to have a wider variety of arts represented in these meetings, but you know, we work with what we have. So I'd love to go back to that, but maybe Larry, want to go next?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm new to this meeting and I'm not a visual artist, but I'm a writer, and I've had similar experiences that some of you have described. I could get up in the morning, have my breakfast, sit down at my my computer, and then it's lunchtime and I'm hungry because and the time has vanished. And one of I write about spirituality, so I've written a book called The Psychology of Spirituality, and there's some interesting stuff I hope you will find about trying to define spirituality, saying something along the lines of it's not a specimen to dissect and scrutinize, it's more better considered as a kind of adventure playground, the spiritual playground to be explored, where we find excitement and education, and learn through exploring that wonderful playground, which of course is the whole of creation. So, like one of your earlier speakers, the spiritual dimension is everywhere and is everything and in everyone. There's some wonderful research on children's spirituality, which I would have valued the opportunity to say more about, but there's also that in that book. And there's a chapter on art and spirituality in this book called called The Big Book of Wisdom, which, as you can see, is actually not that very big, published in 2020. So art and creativity is one of the chapters. Art can be said to form a living bridge between mind and spirit. And one of the things that I don't think you have discussed today, and I would be quite interested in, is do you ever reflect on the effect of your work on the observer? Because the observer, because the value of the work, to some extent, it seems to me, depends upon that communication, that kind of magical communication, a kind of emotional and spiritual sensitivity is required with which to receive the generous gift of the artist. So whether you have anything to say about your audience or your, I don't know what you call them, your patrons, which brings up another subject, the question of art versus merchandise. I don't know if any of you, kind of need to make a living out of what you do in your artwork, but there's obviously a balance to be struck there. So I feel I have lots to say, and I felt throughout the hour or so we've been together that I wanted to say so much, but it's obviously not possible to verbalize everything. Just to say, thank you for letting me join you.
No, not at all. In fact, thank you for this turn, because I was waiting for everybody to speak in order to ask this group to move on to another, because there are basically there are three agents. There is the creator, there is the object, and then there is the receiver, the perceiver, the audience. And tonight we've spoken a lot about the creative experience and what it does to the artist, how art can be used as a meditative tool or vice versa. But and similar to Larry's question, my question, the question I wanted to pose to this group is, what about the art object? That's why I asked Paula to pin her issue regarding dance, because obviously it's a performance, so it's not quite an object in itself. But I was wondering, in a similar way to Larry, if people have something to say regarding the art object, whether the art object itself may have agency, as an anthropologist theorized, whether we project on the art object magical powers, because Degard brought up this issue last time, in this fairs, the body mind spirit fair, where people sell art objects that apparently have these magical effects or powers. So obviously this has an effect on the audience. So I think in our discussion, we also need to introduce these other two agents. One is the art object, which can also be a performance or a piece of music, and the audience that experiences it.
Well, yes, because since the mid-20th century, art became participatory. So there is the participatory turn in art, which is we discussed a lot. So yeah, there's so many topics we can still discuss, of course. I mean,
yeah, but specifically, okay, the participatory, but specifically, when is that spiritual?
well, it depends on the work. It depends on the work. It depends on the actual intention of the artist as well.
Matilde, do you want to say something?
So I was so grateful that Paula brought up the idea of the dance, because I do performance drawings. So my drawings are 1.5 meter high and 10 meters long. So there is all the mark making, all the movement that goes into the mark making. The moment that the mark is done, all the movement and all the dance that went behind it is just like disappears. I can only say my experience. When I did performance drawings in public, I always asked the audience to stay well behind me, so not to interact with me, so I can draw for like 4 hours solid, and the people just come and go. They come in, they sit, they look, and then they leave. And the feedback that I got is that they felt that they were like prayers. So my sort of like drawing, etc., was just like sort of like a praying kind, even though they were not aware of what was going on within me. As for the artifact, I can throw it in the bin afterwards. I'm not interested. I just doesn't exist for me. For me, it's just the pure experience of the act of drawing. Nor interested in even though now I cut them up in pieces and I frame these big long pieces and I try to sell them, because of course we need to make money and living out of our arts in a way. Not a very easy thing to do. As much as not as very easy thing to find a 10 meter long wall where actually I can put on my paper and do some drawing. But yeah, I don't think that the paper in itself has got anything energetic unless probably somebody picks it up. I don't know. I never went there, so I'm really curious of what other people's beliefs of their work.
Well, I have to come again to the context and the intention, because, for example, at the beginning of the century, when Dada started to do performances, that art movement, so for them it was they intentionally irritated the people who came to be part of it. It was the Cabaret Voltaire, so it was the beginning of triggering the viewers and the observers to become active. So because they weren't used to become active, so they used to upset the audience, so to get them involved, to get a reaction. But for them it was also some kind of ritual, and it wasn't really sort of discussed as spiritual, but when you go into the writings and what they sort of intended, they did describe it a little bit like tribal rituals and the actual performance. So for them it had something spiritual, something kind of, again, trying to return to the roots of creativity, to the tribal sort of shamanic kind of stage. So that was the beginning. And Antonin Artaud, for example, it was, the theater of cruelty at the beginning of the century. So for him, it was an entire, the performance became a ritual, and he was trying to upset and trigger reactions, and there was no more this division between audience and performance. And this is where performance started to perform everywhere. There was no more stage. I mean, it was sort of like the audience and the performance started to use the space together. It was so. I mean, it's a huge topic, and it's sort of kind of evolved throughout the 20th century into the 21st century, where it's taken different shapes and forms. And even a belly dance. I mean, because I did some work with an amazing dancer. I mean, and well, I just worked with him on research because, and with belly dance, I mean, there is that, yes, we don't have time to talk about the humiliation and the way that the dancers are sometimes treated as lower class. But there is another aspect to it which is also regarded as divine, like Kulthum. I don't know if you know her, Paula. When she was singing, the Egyptian singer, very well known, and the entire audience participated in her performances. I mean, it was like a religious ritual, really. And sometimes in belly dance, it also happens that kind of very sort of, it's sort of beyond the physical. It becomes kind of well, I don't want to use words like higher states because they sound kind of pretentious, but it's kind of transcendental in a way. It's beyond.
Yeah, belly dancing is very participatory and always has been. And shows I've done with Middle Eastern people are completely different to European people because of that. And the energy is extremely intense. You know, and sometimes I've felt that I've no longer got control over my own body. I've been in, this was a long time ago, this wouldn't happen to me now. It's like 20 years ago or so. And just doing things, crazy things, which really give me a heart attack. That didn't seem to be my idea, if you know what I mean. But belly dancing is so kind of working class, peasants, rural sort of thing. But at the same time, in Egypt, there's also a ritual, dance ritual called the Zar, which is done by poor people, rural people, which is extremely spiritual, which I've participated in. And I've seen very strange things happen to people, including myself. So yeah, people sometimes have a stereotype which is to do with racism, which is to do with if they're Christian, the fact that it's an other, people are othered because of what they do. But I love participating with other people and having a shared experience. And for me, even just at someone's like wedding party, I've been in very intensely beautiful, never know when it's going to happen, you know, or maybe it'll never happen again, but really uplifting, very feelings of oneness and feelings that my body was somehow involved in that transmission, like a shaman almost. The belly dancer is like someone who is a focus, even though this is like in an Islamic culture. But within that, in Islamic culture, there's other fringe things like Sufism and, you know, like Gnosticism and Christianity. There's things like that which use movement and creativity to transcend.
Yeah, thank you, Paula.
I feel we haven't really answered Larry's question. We went back to our experience. But what I don't want to repeat myself, but you know, what Paula described is the original purpose of the arts. The original purpose of the arts was ritualistic, and it was about bringing a group into a one organic group, like an organism rather than separate individuals. So I think situations that Paula has described, which are very rare, I think, in the West, if we exclude raves and concerts and perhaps football games or sport events. And of course, you know, they used to be religious, but because people are not as religious as they used to be anymore, we've lost that. We've lost that structure. So that's, you know, that's what all I wanted to add to that, is that perhaps because it was a peasant kind of activity, it's more primitive, as in it's more like a child, you know, like our primitive experiences, as in primordial experiences, which, yeah, I think we should probably bring back. But yeah, I don't know if that's going to be possible.
Excuse me, but another challenge for art, as for everyone, seems to me to be the state of the world, with not just the secular materialist society, but the evolving climate crisis, the threat of warfare, and so on. To what extent do any of you think that art has a responsibility to respond to those threats?
Well, I mean, I didn't plant this question, but they've just opened an exhibition called Dear Earth at the Hayward Gallery. Where do you live, Larry?
I live in Sussex, in West Sussex.
Well, if you happen to come to London?
Never.
Never. Okay, you have to.
Well, I don't like going to London if I can avoid it, but anyway, tell me what you were going to say.
Well, basically, this exhibition will open next week, and it is exactly what you've just asked. How can the artists participate to the climate crisis? And this particular exhibition has been curated by Rachel Thomas in the form of caring. So the message of the exhibition is caring about the earth, and the 14 artists that participate, most of their work is about showing care for the earth. So it's a really interesting exhibition. There are lots of plants, you know, everywhere growing, and it's less, you know, patronizing and activist, if you want. There are some artists that are political and are activists, but most of the pieces are really about reconnecting. Was somebody talking about connection in regards to spirituality? Matilde. Yeah, so it's really about reconnecting us to nature through the arts, which I think is what art is for. Like it's about connecting people and reconnecting at a I wouldn't say subliminal level, but more intuitive level, more emotional level.
There is also, I think it's got to do with our own personal ethics as people, besides being as artists. Now, there's a form of congruence. So I'm congruent with being myself, whether I'm a therapist, it's me, or I'm driving, or it's me making an artifact or drawing. I think that the fact of especially coming out with the idea that there is spiritual artists out there, that there is a spiritual art, especially when the mainstream follows, and I've got to say this because I've been a bonnet with him, people like art historians and critics like James Elkins, whom I love for a lot of other things, but who said that spiritual art is just bad art, because spirituality and art are both two religions with their own dogmas, with their own things. They cannot talk. So anybody who does anything that is slightly spiritual is just basically pointless to be represented. in a way or another. So I think that it's important that there is this also strand of artist and art and spirituality connected together, and that we've got our own ethics. There is a care for the environment. I'm very keen on Gaia theory, Lovelock, etc. But so all my studies of materialism stem from the fact of being energy, of not having an end between me and the piece of paper. So there is sort of like the idea of recycling, of energy, of materials, of intermingling, or whatever, that's the word that is eluding me at the moment. So there is I think a form of almost militantism in the moment that I actually stand in front of the paper and make my own thing. So I think that there is out there.
Well, of course, you know, one exhibition doesn't make a movement. There are other artists that might not feel that it's their mission to reconnect people with nature. But there's certainly a lot more of it than only a few years ago.
There is a lot. There's an entire movement of art and the environment. There were so many interesting works done on climate change, brilliant projects, and that's what it's really interesting question to raise. Is this is something that I wonder about sometimes, is whether art and activism actually work. I mean, it's going to make any difference in the world. Well, I don't know. I'm just wondering, because it is a question that's been asked anyway, but I wonder about it sometimes, because look where we are now in terms of climate change. And this movement is going on for a long time, including art and the environment. And I wonder if it makes any difference. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to sound positive or negative. I just ask. I think it's a good question. Anyway, art and activism is disputed sometimes. In terms, cannot be an activist act, or can activist act can be art, whatever, you know. I mean, but it's interesting, yeah.
I think the fault is mainly on the gatekeepers, not the artists.
Oh, I see.
Because artists do what they do.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, if they care about the earth, they do art that is earth-based. If they're activists, they will do art about activism. But at the end of the day, it is the galleries, the museum curators, the collectors, you know, it's the critics, the art theorists that put them in front of the, you know, the general public or not. And it's like spirituality, you know. I was really upset today. I went to this talk about Hilma af Klint, organized by the Tate.
By the Tate, yeah. Did you go? Yeah, I went to the talk. I was one, yeah.
I went.
Yeah, I'm very curious about it. Yeah, please tell us, yeah.
The person, actually, I think I recorded it. Yeah, the person that presented it didn't know anything about Hilma af Klint at all. And she's actually told the audience incorrect things, facts about her launch as an artist into, you know, in our consciousness. And it was clear. She said it. She said, "I've never heard of her before. This is the first time I've ever heard of Hilma af Klint." And I was sitting there going, "What?
So why? Yeah, yeah.
Why would she do the talk?"
Can I, sorry if I'm interrupting you, but if you want to have, and not to blow my own trumpet, because anyway, it's free, I don't get anything, but if you want to read anything different about Hilma af Klint, just read my dissertation, because I was against James Elkins about spiritual art, and against every single one of the art historians. I've got every single book published on her here. because they represent her always in the same ways, like a single woman, so she must be a lesbian, somebody who does religion, so she must have had issues with the psychotherapy. She was the first abstract artist and blah, 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 then start talking for 2 hours about Kandinsky and all the other ones. And she was doing this and she was doing that. And I thought, can we just talk about her work? Can we just talk about the way that she painted? And so if you want to read something a bit different, and this is why I've used a Deleuzian fully rhizomatic approach to Hilma af Klint, because I thought I'm just so tired, and I kept on sending my dissertation everywhere and nobody cares.
I'm very happy. I would love to read it. Where can we get it? I mean, can you send it?
You can download it for free either on my website, and I'm going to post it in the chat, or on ResearchGate. It's also there.
Yeah, so at the end of this talk, I raised my hand and I said, the reason you never heard of Hilma af Klint is because there's been a complete erasure of the spiritual in art. And so if you're in front of this censor in the field, in the entire Western artistic field, I mean, it's very difficult for artists make their voice heard. Like,
very difficult.
They just won't let them speak. It's just very sad, actually, but yeah. Which is why I think it's important to cultivate patrons, art patrons, which is something that I'm working on. And this is like a side job that I'm doing, which is going in front of wealthy private clients, of banks, and see if I can inspire them or motivate them to support the arts, not just buy the art, but support, all arts, but from dance to performance to theater to music to art, because we need it more than ever. And I do believe that if we practiced more art, we would probably also start solving problems, essential problems like the environmental crisis. Because it brings people together.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Well, I have a lot to say about it, but I think we can continue. It's such an interesting conversation. Can continue another time.
Yeah, we've reached our time.
Yeah.
Just on a side note, thank you for letting me know about the Haworth Gallery, because I'm actually in London next week. I'm doing a writing retreat week for my master thesis now. So I'm going to be down south London, Oxford. I've chosen some specific places I want to go and write. So if actually there is anything else that you think I should watch and could watch when I'm in London on sea, just drop me.
Well, there is the Dear Earth opening next Tuesday or next Tuesday, but you could from the Haworth Gallery you could walk to the Tate Modern and see Hilma af Klint, but also there is Yayoi Kusama as well. Look for that because it's limited, and there is a Czech artist that is Maria, forgot her last name.
Yeah, you know what you
who
mean.
is
The
also
one with
quite
the
interesting. And she's also explored spirituality and nature and art. So again, there is this connection between art, nature, and spirituality.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so
Matilde, are you doing, you say you're doing some writing things, are they things that are open to other people, or are they just for you, or what's going on?
So for my master thesis, besides the critical exegesis, which is about 10,000 words in which I'm ranting on about drawing and spirituality and how unhappy I am, I'm handing in another 15,000 words on sort of like a personal drawing and personal journaling about the writing practice, which I've titled the Polyhymniadis. So as of now, these are not going to be free for people to see. I just need to hand them in and then I can just upload them. Yeah. So otherwise you can find
Same.
And otherwise, you can find my books on Amazon because I've published
really?
6 books. So you can find anything that you want on there.
I want it to be participatory.
Well,
So
if you
we
want,
would
you
like
can
to
look me up on
participate in your
Facebook.
work.
Yeah, you can look me up on Facebook, and I can send you some of the draft of my latest stuff that I'm writing for the dissertation. So you can all be participating in reading my drafts and making
Have you
comments.
got somewhere to stay?
I'm actually I'm a campsite and camping fanatic. So I'm staying in Bicester. I found a lovely campsite in Bicester. So and then I'm driving to Stonehenge on the 20th, and then I'm in London for 2 days because I booked myself in Westminster Abbey and another couple of places I want to go and write physically there. And then watch galleries and stuff. And then I want to go and write in the Bodleian in Oxford. So this is why I've chosen Bicester as a place to stay. Then I can drive from there in all other places.
So are you going to stay up for the solstice on Stonehenge, Matilde?
Well, it's closed. This is why I could only book because I think that they are open only for pagans associations and everything. So it's closed to the public, and they close earlier on the day before. So I booked myself in like the very last slot, like from 12 till 3 p.m. on the 20th, and I can go around with my incense stick and my candles and my tarot cards and hide in a corner.
Another book.
I'm
Another
just holding up my eco-catastrophe novel recently published.
Hey, another one. Oh, hold on a second. And this is my last one. Can you see mine? This is my last one.
Okay. 1,000 names.
Yes.
Great title. I like it. 1,000 names. Also the flood, after the flood. Wonderful. Wow.
Is that the coming flood, Larry? Or
Yes,
It is the apocalyptic.
It says, I won't read all the blurb here, but it includes a 4-generation family saga, a sex-fueled love story, a heartwarming tale of male comradeship and adventure, and a prophetic account of impending eco-catastrophe. All assembled into one stupendous, rollicking roller coaster narrative addressing all the major problems of this challenging historical epoch. But if that doesn't sell a few copies, I don't know what will.
Don't worry. Oh, thank you, everybody. That was brilliant.
Don't miss our next meeting. It's going to be with Carol Bowes, got her last name now, and she's going to talk about the expressive arts and shamanism. So some of the things we touched upon today, she'll probably explain to us probably more deeply how it all works. And it's in July, is that the 11th?
The 11th.
11th. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Pleasure to be
Thank
here.
you all. Bye.